Welcome to the class. Today, we are going to talk about the structure of English sentence once again. We are going to talk about the structure of English in the backdrop of learning language. We are going to mix couple of things to show you specific details of structure in English. We are going to show you how it works, how the computation works, how these structures are processed in human mind, and they are unique, but they don't escape the processing of human mind. And when we understand them, when we look at them, when we appreciate their uniqueness and processing, underlying processing, we get to learn something very subtle about the structure of language, in particular, structure of English language. So, we are going to look at this and we are going to see how they work. The element that we are going to look at today, these elements are called negative sensitive elements. There are some elements in English language which occur only when you have a negative sentence. In other words, only when you have a negative element in a sentence. So, and we are going to show you the descriptions of that. Such elements do occur in other languages too. Such elements occur in the languages that you speak primarily as your first language. When we are done discussing these things, I invite you to think about your own language, to think about the languages that you speak effortlessly, language that you grew up speaking as a child. There is a reason for that. The reason why I am asking you to think about that is, having looked at the structures that we are going to discuss today for English, when you compare and when you first you look at how these structures of English are processed in our mind, then you look at how such elements you learned effortlessly in your language without any specific attention. When you look at this comparison at this stage in learning for you, you are going to see this example and you are going to learn this one. At the same time, other examples of such importance, other nuances of English structure of this type will come to your attention and they will become easier for you to learn. So let us start with this. As we know, we learn language by looking at grammatical competence. That is, we understand structure through how it gets processed in our mind, along with pragmatic competence. At some other point, we will talk about pragmatic competence separately. But pragmatic simply means how we use the language. So there are certain constraints we apply in the use of language, and they are beyond grammar. They are not grammatical in nature, but they are very important because they go side by side with grammar. So the main point is the entire process of learning of language happens simultaneously with grammatical competence on one side and pragmatic competence on the other side. So what this grammatical competence is? What is this grammatical competence? It is sometimes called simply competence, sometimes called linguistic competence, sometimes called I language. They are all different names. They do have their specific meanings, but for the purpose of this class, I would request you to look at all these elements as language processing that happens internal to our mind. At the same time, the term performance or linguistic performance or pragmatic competence or communicative competence or e-language, these are the terms for how we use language, for understanding the rules in language use, how we learn the rules of language use. So, as we are saying, learning means both together. Rules of language structure and rules of language use. Together, these two things together make language learning complete. Having said that, we know that these are the elements that help us understand language as a unique thing, language as a unique capacity of humans. Because learning of language is also a unique method. We learn language effortlessly as a child, but as a grown-up adult, we have to put efforts in learning language. We are all trying to improve our English by putting in efforts. And hence it becomes important for us to pay attention to the things that are effortless, that are learned effortlessly as children. And that makes language as a special endowment. And this is the reason, because as a child we learn language effortlessly. This is the reason why sometimes it is said learning language is a child's play. So the reason for that is what we need to know as given that all normal human children are born to learn language. They are by birth equipped with language acquisition device and universal grammar within it which they use for the purpose of learning language. And in between, they are components of hypothetical components of human mind. And as you see in this picture, language acquisition device as part of human mind is what is responsible for processing the input that comes to human mind, which is very fuzzy, not targeted towards learning language and limited in quantity. They come from immediate society, that is, the kinds of languages spoken around the child from the immediate society, family, relatives, etc. And as an output, the same language comes out, but what gets guaranteed through the processing of this human mind is that the output is perfectly grammatical and infinite in nature. And thus, we speak the language. This doesn't quite work for adults, but what works is also part of it. Please hear me out carefully. This is an elaboration of how children learn, but how adults learn language, how grown-ups learn language follows from understanding this structure. This follows from what goes in learning as a child. So, with this, children develop language as a generative system. Using their generative system, they develop language as a capacity, and as we know, it miraculously develops. And this happens through the inbuilt hypothetical language acquisition device. This process is very fast for children, very effortless, and requires no instruction. And here is the key for us. Whatever that processing happens requires instruction for adults, meaning requires attention. It's not effortless the way it is for children, therefore it requires efforts. And The processing is not as fast, but not equally fast, but little slower than that. Still very fast. So efforts and instruction together is limited in the structural part. And this is the reason why we need to focus attention to structures. So, as an example of this discussion, as an example of how we focus, what we pay attention to, and how the processing works for us, we are going to look at negation and some negative sensitive elements in the structure of English, and I am going to put them in perspective for you to understand. So, we have seen the functioning of negation little bit earlier. So, let's refresh them. When a negative element appears in a sentence, it makes the sentence negative. So, let us go back and remind ourselves. The sentence has two parts, namely subject and predicate. So, negation, and other than subject, everything is part of predicate. What we know, in addition, is inside predicate, the most important part is the verb, because every other part of predicate is about the verb. So, within the predicate, when negation occurs, it negates the whole sentence in a particular way. And so, the negation as part of the predicate negates the whole sentence, and therefore, we say a sentence is negative. So, what are the negative words in English? We have no and not. Very simple, two specific negative elements in English. So, we have a sentence like John is a doctor. Look at this sentence. It's a very simple, plain sentence. This is an affirmative sentence. When we say John is not a doctor, this is a negative sentence. This not is a negative word in this sentence, and this whole sentence becomes negative because of that. What I invite you and what I remind you to invoke from your understanding is negation always comes in a sentence around tense. So, when we look at tense and negation together, it gives us a very important understanding. It builds our understanding in an important way. How does that happen? Please look at that. See, we can take a sentence, John likes novels or storybooks or movies. We are taking these examples only for the purpose of learning. So, please pay attention to the structural details that we are talking about. And then, having seen these things, we will apply these to the spoken language. This is an affirmative sentence. To make it a negative sentence, we need to bring in a negation element, and you will be surprised to see that the presence, so tense is part of this verb here. As you know, this is an affirmative sentence, but present tense. So, present tense somehow is embedded in this verb. to make it a negative sentence, or when this sentence becomes negative, you will be surprised to see this tense has to come out of the verb. So, in an affirmative sentence, tense and verb are together with each other. So, and when a sentence becomes negative, when a negation comes in a sentence and it makes the sentence negative, here is how I want you to understand. The way verb and tense are, they are like this with one another. They have to separate from one another and negation has to come in between. How? Look at the following example to understand. What is the negative of this sentence? John does not like novels. Please understand that. Like is the verb and here is the negation and here is your tense and number. That is present tense and singular number. So, this whole thing had to separate out of the verb for this to occur, which is not the case in an affirmative sentence. In an affirmative sentence, number, that is singular because the subject is singular, and tense, present, they are all together on it. Number is visible with S and tense is not visible. But despite of tense not being visible in an affirmative sentence, we need to separate it out, or it gets separated, that's a better way of saying, when a sentence becomes negative. So, a negation and a negative sentence or a sentence where negation makes the sentence negative is an important thing to pay attention to. Same thing happens in the past tense. You have seen this before. This was just to remind your memory. So, if we said John liked novels and we want to make it a negative sentence, you have to say did not like. So, this becomes past and this is your verb and negation comes in between. So, in short, for negation to occur in a sentence, tense has to separate from the verb. It's not just a statement. What we need to know and what we want to pay attention to is, in a sentence, negation occurs in between tense and verb. So, the order of elements in a sentence is tense, negation, verb, and then objects. That's the important part. So, this is about negation. Now, this is about affirmative and negative sentences. What the next I want you to see is, there are certain elements in English sentence which can occur only when a sentence is negative, not when sentence is affirmative. Let's look at those sentences. We call them negative sensitive elements. And they are not something that we don't know about. I am just trying to bring your attention to these things. You have already used these things 100 times, but I want you to look at these elements afresh to see the beauty of structural description and or understanding nuances of structure of English language. You will appreciate structural nuances in a better way by looking at these things. So, look at these things. Terms like anybody, anyone, or anything, or just for that matter, just any. These are some of the negative sensitive elements. So, when we say anybody or anyone, it is plus any mate. or when we say anything, it is minus animate. Meaning plus animate means it is used for living things, minus animate means it is used for non-living things. So anybody has another counterpart, somebody. So somebody or someone or something, these are not negative sensitive elements, not sensitive to negation. Meaning these elements can occur in a sentence without negation also, in affirmative sentences, but not these. Likewise, we have some elements like a word with a special meaning, a penny. I'm going to show you these things in a moment, these two. But let's first look at anybody, anyone, anything, or any. Let's look at these examples. When we say John did not like anything, look at this. We can never say John liked anything. This is not a good sentence in English, and therefore I am putting a star here. Not good means ungrammatical. What it means is, for anything to be used in this sentence must be a negative sentence. So, the presence of this word anything is contingent upon not negative element in the sentence. And see this is the past tense, tense is already separated, here is the verb. Here is tense and here is negative thing. And this is negative sensitive. So anything, you know the meaning of this sentence. But all I am adding to this nuanced structural description is anything is a negative sensitive element in English language because it can only occur with negation in a negative sentence in English. Mary did not meet with anyone. Look at this. It is contingent again upon this not. This is tense, this is negation, this is the verb. Because we cannot say Mary met with anyone. This is not a good sentence in English. We can say Mary met with someone. Therefore, we said, remember, someone, somebody, something, these are not negative sensitive elements. So, we can say Mary met with someone, but we can never say Mary met with anyone. That's not possible in English. What does this mean? What is the meaning of not possible? It means very simple thing. It means anyone can occur in a sentence only with negation. And as you know, any is just, it's any which is making, this is how we combine anybody, anyone, anything to make it plus animate or minus animate. So I hope this becomes clearer to you in understanding what we mean by negative sensitive element and how one is contingent, how these elements are contingent upon, dependent on negative elements in English sentence. Think about more sentences like these. Think about sentences where you can use them without negation. And I'm going to show you the context where they can be used without negation, but in very restrictive environments. And you will see that. Before that, please look at some more examples. We can say, Raju did not speak a word. Look at this phrase, a word. Here, a word doesn't mean literally one word. Here, metaphorically, it means anything or nothing. So, again, this element can only be used with that meaning in a negative sentence. We can say Raju spoke a word, but here a word means literally one word. With anything interpretation, it can only be used in a negative sentence. Sarita did not give a penny. We can say to, let's say, beggars. Sometimes beggars ask us for something. Sarita did not give a penny to beggars. We can say this metaphor as a penny or a red cent. This is an American phrase. Cent is a unit of money. It's the smallest unit of money, which means one, which it's equivalent to our one paise. So here also the interpretation is nothing or anything, meaning these things can only occur when you have negation in the sentence. If you use them, then it means literally a penny, meaning if you use them without negation, then it means literally a penny or a cent. It doesn't carry the same interpretation. So some elements like anything, anybody, or anyone, a red cent, a penny. There are some other elements. At all. We have to say Sarita did not speak at all. We cannot say Sarita spoke at all. So these elements are sensitive to negation. Therefore, it is important for us to pay attention to these nuances. We do find one context where these elements can occur without negation, but that context is very unique and they can only come if the sentence is a question sentence. We can say, did you meet with anyone? Look at this sentence. There is no negation, but it is a question sentence. Did you get a penny? We can't say that. So any one type of negative sensitive element can occur with question sentence, but a penny type of or a word type of negative sensitive element cannot occur even in question sentence. So these two need negation only to occur. These anyones need negation or question. So here I stop with this discussion, and I want you to keep this very unique structure in mind as our discussion on nuances of structure of English sentences. Understanding particular grammatical pattern where we use certain sensitive elements with negation. We need to pay attention to these elements to understand the processing of these things and learning of these things. Now, as I mentioned in the beginning, I invite you to pay attention to these kinds of elements in the languages that you speak. Make a list of those elements. Compare them with the elements, negative sensitive elements of of English, compare them with negative sensitive elements of English, and see how you learned these elements effortlessly when you acquired your language as first language, and that will give you an insight into why we need to pay attention to that process of learning in order for us to learn these things in a new language. When we are making efforts to learn these things, without putting in efforts, without paying attention to these processes, we won't get to the detailed nuances of these structures. And therefore, it is important for us to see these things. Hope this was useful, helpful to you. Please do the exercises that I have mentioned here. Please do the pattern analysis, pattern comparison between your language and English. And we look forward to your comments and discussion on these types. See you next time. Until then, bye-bye.